And we are live.
Wonderful. If you could pull up the staff presentation, Dallas, that would be great.
You bet.
Thank you so much. Welcome everyone to the virtual neighborhood meeting for the Modern West Phase 2 project. Next slide, please. So this virtual meeting is being held this evening to discuss the project, which is located in the southwest portion of the city. I am Kristen Cody. I am a senior planner with the City of Longmont Planning and Development Services Department. With us tonight is Dallas Stiles, who is a live stream digital specialist. He will be facilitating the virtual portion of this meeting. And I will introduce the development team with Modern West. We have Mickey Leba, Barb Brunk, Derek Gracio, Frank Romero, and Kimberly Broughton. So thank you everyone for being here tonight. I will briefly go over our agenda and then we will go into staff presentation and applicant presentation, and then we will take questions. So we will, with this meeting tonight, we will kind of look at the meeting overview and format. I will talk about process overview in regards to the application. Then we will talk about what the applicant next steps are. And we will have the applicant presentation. We will also take public comments and questions, and then we will conclude the meeting. Next slide, please. So a little bit of virtual housekeeping. At the point where we are ready to take public comments and questions, you will call in when indicated after the presentations. When you call in, we ask that you mute your live stream, and you will, when you call in, you will be called upon by the last 3 digits of your phone number. You'll be given a number and the meeting ID. If you want to raise your hand after you have spoken to ask additional questions, you press *9, and we will give you additional direction at the time when we are ready to take questions. Next slide, please. This proposal is to amend the existing proposed concept plan for a 27.25 acre portion of the Schlegel-Williams annexation to permit for a mix of housing, commercial, and light industrial with amenity spaces. Originally, with the annexation, this area was completely proposed to be industrial and with an economic component to it. Next slide, please. Process and project overview. So there was a pre-application meeting that was held with the DRC in November of 2022. As per Longmont Development Code, a neighborhood meeting is required prior to an application being submitted to the city, which is where we are at this evening. After this meeting, the applicant will be making an application to the city for a concept plan amendment, which will be reviewed by the DRC, which is the Design Review Committee. Once that has been through the Design Review Committee process and found to be appropriate for public hearing, public hearings will be held by both the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. Planning and Zoning Commission is a recommendation body, and City Council is the decision-making body on a concept plan amendment. Following that concept plan amendment, as long as it is approved by City Council, the next steps will be the preliminary platting process, final platting process, site plan, and public improvement plans process, which all require applications and DRC review and approvals. Next slide, please. This is a vicinity map of the property. It is currently south of Rogers Road. It is zoned mixed use employment, and as I said previously, it is 27.25 acres. Next slide, please. This gives a little bit closer overview of the MUE zoning. It is surrounded on the north side by unincorporated Boulder County with a small portion of unincorporated land to the east of it. The majority is that MUE district with a small amount of residential single family. To the east of it also, the proposed residential use is a permitted secondary use within the zone district. There is the Modern West Phase 1 development is south of the site, as well as a RV storage facility that is currently constructed and in use. Next slide, please. With that, I will let the applicants take over with their presentation.
Thank you, Kristen. I'm Barb Brunk with the Modern West team. Again, this is a simple process. We are trying to amend the existing concept plan to be more consistent with the existing zoning. It's located there at the extension of south of Rogers and extension of Anderson. And this is really consistent with the other Modern West project, which is to create a new high quality, inclusive, sustainable, and energy efficient mixed use neighborhood. And this site is very well located for pedestrian connections to the city's both trails and future transit Nelson Road. Next slide, please. Again, here we are in the world. Kristen already talked about this. The orange stripe is the mixed use employment district, and this is the property. You can see that currently if you've been down behind Home Depot, they're building out a portion of Mountain Brook and Fordham, I think, going Dry Creek Drive, going north south, and at some point in the future, this Mountain Brook will be connected over to Rogers, and Anderson will be connected up to Rogers, and then there'll be a north-south connection that goes down to Nelson that gets developed with the adjacent property. Next slide. Again, the land use designation is for mixed use employment, and there, as Kristen said, there are primary and secondary uses, and the primary uses are employment, office, flex space, and commercial, and secondary are retail, cultural, high density residential, and live work. Next slide. Sorry about the blur. This is blown up from the concept plan that was attached to the ordinance. So the existing concept plan that was approved for this site when it was annexed in 2000 is consistent with the previous BLI zoning. And at the time, it was designated industrial economic development on the Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan. Since that time, Envision Longmont was approved, and that changed the land use designation to mixed use employment. So what we're trying to do is change the land use designation on the property to be more consistent with that mixed use employment zoning. And so our proposal is for a mix of commercial, industrial, multifamily residential, and you can see the Niwot Ditch primary greenway, and then drainage and outlot. So it's a bubble diagram, and as Kristen said, it'll go through the rest of the process for site-specific design on each property. So this is just the big picture to bring the land use into compliance with the existing zoning and the existing land use, approved land use on the property. Next slide. Again, this is a zoning. It's mixed use employment. So when they updated the zoning code, they changed this property from BLI, which was business light industrial, to mixed use employment. And you can see as Kristen said, it's surrounded except for the portion that is in unincorporated Boulder County on the north. Next slide. That zoning is specifically intended for a mix of uses. When Envision Longmont was adopted, we kind of looked at the whole city and tried to make it so that each neighborhood had a mix of uses instead of all one thing. And so the MUE is really specifically targeted to have employment, commercial, industrial, and high density residential, so people can live and work in close proximity and help us with our bikes and feet instead of all vehicles. So that concentration of density and proximity to our city's trail system is really ideal for this property as a mixed use development. Next slide. Again, this is how we fit into the context. So you can see the residential, multifamily residential is up against Rogers. Commercial industrial is along the corridor here. Another multifamily, and then the drainage outlots that are over on the eastern side of the property. And the really nice thing here is there's a connection along the Niwot Ditch that will go south along the primary greenway and north up to Likens Gulch and then into the Golden Ponds and into the trails network in the city. And then to the south, Modern West 1 has a connection that will get our through the center of that property down to the arterial on Nelson, which has transit. So it's very well situated for that feet and bikes and transit as opposed to all cars. Next slide. Again, this is a simple concept plan. there'll be 2 accesses onto Rogers Road, several accesses off of Mountain Brook, and then Anderson at some point. And again, these are placeholders for access. The actual details of access and how these property develop will happen at site plan review through the city review process. Next slide. This is just to leave you with what we're trying to do. A simple request. We're trying to change the existing concept plan, which is that industrial economic development, to be more consistent with the existing zoning and land use plan, which is a mix of uses. That's our story, and we're here to answer your questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that. So the next steps in the process, as we kind of previously discussed, the next step would be that application for the concept plan amendment, which would require review by the Development Review Committee, when a notice of application will be required to be sent with that. That requires a public hearing before the Planning Commission, who is a recommendation body. And that would then also be required to go to City Council, who is the decision-making body in regards to that kind of an application, which also requires a notice of public hearing to be sent. And there'd be subsequent applications and reviews that would be required to accomplish what Barb was discussing or showing in her presentation, which includes preliminary plat, final plat, site plan, and public improvement plans. You know, as far as timeframes, which typically everybody's interested in regards to projects, that is always kind of hard to say because it's very dependent on submittal times and speed of submittals. But usually with this number of applications, you might be looking up to 2 years before everything is said and done and approved. You know, it obviously could be shorter than that, but it could be longer than that also. Next slide, please. So now it is time to take some public questions and comments. We will take a 5-minute break to give people the opportunity to call in. When you call in, we ask that you do mute your live feed so we don't get feedback. You'll be given 3 minutes per speaker to state your questions or concerns, as is standard with city council meetings. Please, when you are stating, before you state your questions or comments or concerns, state your name and your address for the record. And I will let Dallas indicate or include any information that I may have forgotten.
Sure thing. So yes, we're going to start the 5-minute timer here, folks. If you want to call in, that number is 1-888-788-0099. When you're prompted, please enter the meeting ID 890-4229-2565. Again, you'll be addressed by the last 3 digits of your phone number, and you will be able to unmute and mute your microphone at will. That'll be with *6. Once I prompt you, you'll be able to unmute it, and then you can remute it if you'd like. With that, we're going to take our 5-minute break, and we'll be back in a second. Thanks. We have about 30 seconds left. Just wanted to say again, if we have any callers, that number is 1-888-788-0099. Again, the meeting ID is 890-4229-2565. If you have any questions or comments, please call in now. All right, Kristen, I am not seeing any callers currently in our chat.
All right. Well, if we do
Yep,
not.
so we have no callers tonight. With that, I think it's going to be a quick one.
Right. We could go to then, I believe, the next slide in the presentation. Perfect. Well, if I would like to then thank everybody for taking the time to attend this virtual meeting. This is my contact information. So if anybody has questions going forward, I would encourage them to not hesitate to reach out by phone or email. My direct number here at the city is 303-651-8735. Certainly also this recording this meeting has been recorded and will be available on the city's YouTube channel. So it can be viewed at a later time if anybody would like to do so. I'd like to thank the development team for taking the time this evening to make this presentation. It's been very, I think, helpful for everybody to understand what you're looking towards doing on that property. I'd like to thank Dallas so much for facilitating this meeting. Yeah, as always, he does a superb job. And yeah, for lack of any questions from the public, I believe that we can end this meeting for this evening. And thank you very much. And everybody have a great night.
Thanks, everybody. You rock. Just saying.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Yep.